Hello, and welcome to We Are the Deluge, a spoiler-free, chapter-by-chapter podcast about the climate change novel The Deluge by Stephen Markley. We are your co-hosts, Emily Crandall and John McMahon, and yes, we are strategically repositioning to retain our social license to operate. Today, we are discussing How to Stop a Revolution. Set in 2029, the second chapter from Jackie's point of view, which we are presenting in the form of a pitch deck, and I'm sure we know a lot more about that now.
Yes, we spent a lot of time since we last saw Jackie thinking about a pitch deck at all.
Yeah. Definitely. Every day of my life, devoted to the grind set. Yeah. Jackie is a grind set character.
Yeah, this chapter was so fascinating to me. I really liked it. It made me think about a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe at some point we should discuss why it comes at the end of book 2.
Ooh, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, we can start there because it's also been a really long time since we've seen Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
14 years, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, so right into our problems and solutions, John.
Yeah. All right. Hit me, Crandall.
Okay. So we haven't seen Jackie in 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
What's up with her?
I think it's the right question because there's so much of Jackie in this chapter that's quite continuous with the Jackie as a character we met 14 years ago and 200 pages ago. But I think there's also some like crucial disjunctures or discontinuities.
Yeah.
And I think that's oftentimes demonstrated by Markley through her self-conscious commentary on her own actions and what she's doing.
Yeah.
Because we got the kind of like lack of confidence at many times, right? In the hesitancy and the second guessing in a lot of Jackie's like self-narration.
Yeah.
You know, she talks about, I found myself speaking, right, on 249, right? As if like she's out of body observing herself and like couldn't believe it happened. Or that she only brags when she's drunk is she's about to have sex with Fred. But then there's some other, and that's like the old Jackie. And there's also some like new Jackie stuff. Like she says she knows how to say stuff so people stop arguing with her.
Yeah.
She has some kind of like dream of grandiosity, right? She, at the end of the chapter, is like, I have the chance to, quote, shape the American consciousness.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a more mixed or like multiple kind of sense of self at work here.
And I was struck too about how differently she narrates her romantic encounters.
Yes.
She seems to have sort of like translated her, like, men explain things to me. I'm tired of being perceived as like one among many
options
of an object into sort of like contempt
Yes,
for
absolutely.
the people she's entangled with.
Yeah.
But also a kind of curiosity that's like really sexy rather than hesitant. And she is clearly making some, like, in terms of workplace entanglements, questionable choices.
Yeah.
Whether they're like questionable in some other sense is like not really that interesting to me.
Agreed,
I think. Yeah.
fully.
But she's also like confident in those, like both in saying yes and in saying no. I also thought it was very interesting that when she does have sex with Fred, she notes the condom.
Yeah.
Because we noted the absence of a condom last time.
What she noted.
Yeah. Yeah. I like thinking about that as like, this is a multiple Jackie. I think that's a very, I mean, we love multiplicity.
We
here,
obviously do. Several wolves and all.
Yeah. I think her family stuff also was kind of tough in this chapter. So she loses her dad to cancer.
I think so.
Like a
heart problems? No, her mom has a heart problem.
Yeah. No, it's like kidney disease.
Yes.
And he waits too long, right? He's clearly experiencing symptoms. He doesn't go to the doctor. He doesn't trust them or whatever. And then he basically just dies. And we get a lot of her sibling dynamics here, like
just tough.
Animosity and resentment, ressentiment
in all directions.
Yeah.
Right? Like all of them have skepticism and dislike and animosity towards one another, including animosity for the way they're all engaging with the family and with one another.
Yeah. And the mom also seems to sort of like resent the children, which I think is interesting. It's like a mutual resentment, and I wonder how common that is.
Right. And the mutual resentment part is key because there's this point at which like Jackie kind of breaks at the end, right? And like expresses openly like her resentment towards her mom at the same time.
Yeah. I liked the the insult she does not hurl. What is it? Something of you grieving cow or something like, woo. She's really showing her Midwest. She also does show her Midwest in this chapter, but I feel like she wields it strategically.
Please do tell.
Okay, in the meeting, what's the turn of phrase? She's trying to, and we'll pivot to this, I'm sure soon, but she's trying to convince some key players of what they're missing in their strategy. And she borrows a phrase from her dad that's like clearly a farm phrase. Do you remember what it was?
Oh, I remember this, but I don't remember the exact phrase.
Let me see if I can find it without making too many page turning sound effects.
I think if you're discussing a gigantic novel and listening to a podcast about a gigantic novel, you've agreed to a certain amount of page turning.
A certain amount of page turning, yeah. I should just like record it and drop it in every now and then.
Yeah.
Okay,
it would be one of those book podcasts that has like sound effects, like of pages turning really fast whenever we read a quote.
So good.
That's not my favorite podcasting.
No.
Norm. I mean, this is, and I was thinking about when I taught this in relation to kind of Jackie's relationship to her parents and her home and the Midwest and everything, because I do think her striving and girl bossing and professional success and the way she sees that as at odds with her parents, with her hometown, with what her life horizon or life project was, like where she is from in rural Illinois. Like that I actually think spoke to a number of my students in this and future Jackie chapters, where there's this conflict and push and pull between the, kind of classic story of the like, okay, so I went to college and I got a corporate job as a tool of social mobility, but that also produces forms of alienation and detachment at the same time.
Yeah, we talked about David Graeber's bullshit jobs in the last Jackie chapter, which is very funny.
That makes sense.
I found it. She says, well, my father had this expression, kid, that dog won't hunt. It's just so good. And obviously, like, you can imagine that being a literal expression on a farm, but it takes on a metaphorical sense, also probably on the farm. But here it's sort of extrapolated to its most like meta meaning. That dog won't hunt, that dog being relying or like tapping into an American impulse that like freedom is the most important thing. And so if we sell freedom, we're selling the people what they want, right? And exactly. Jackie says, that dog won't hunt. Well, kid, CEOs. Yeah.
There's this phrase that Jackie uses, which might come back in future parts of our pitch. She talks very early on in the chapter, and then she says this again 2 or 3 other times in the chapter. My specialty was steering into the skid. And I'm wondering kind of what you thought that meant for her or what you thought that meant for us as readers.
Ooh, or what does it mean for us as podcasters?
Or us as podcasters. I mean, we're certainly steering into the skid of our own peculiar way of engaging this novel.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one thing that steering into the skid does as a sort of brag is like, I know that like the instinct you have to steer out of something is a bad instinct because it's like a counterintuitive instinct. The thing that you really need to do, or it's an instinct that's bad because the thing you need to do to get out of a situation is do the counterintuitive thing.
Yep.
And that's like sometimes literally like in the case of driving something that's about to lose traction, right? You do the counterintuitive thing so that you don't die. Yep. And here I think she's like, I think she's sort of being a bitch about it too, right? Like the counterintuitive thing actually isn't that counterintuitive if you thought about it for like 5 seconds.
Right. Which is kind of her point. She's like, no one else is smart enough to realize that because no one is willing to think for the 5 seconds. Right.
But so you have to like convince people about why counterintuition is better than intuition. Or, I mean, I think what I loved about this chapter is it's like a masterclass in how to get people to realize they're wrong, but think that they're the ones that came up with the idea and that like the realization that they were wrong doesn't invalidate their rightness.
Right.
Which I don't know about you,
so the Democratic Party should hire Jackie.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I feel like that's something I'm trying to do all the time.
I mean, that's a mode of engaging with students, is it not?
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you why you're wrong, but I don't want you to be discouraged by that wrongness. I want you to be emboldened by it. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it as like a philosophy for how I teach, but I think you're exactly right.
And there's also the steering to the skid. It starts off as part of Jackie self-deprecating or like negging herself. I think at a certain time, it's like first a signifier of the messiness of her life or her inability to fully put together her life and her definition of what it would mean to put together her life or someone's life. But over the course of the chapter, I think it becomes precisely what you just identified, like her setting herself up as, right, the master. Yeah,
the master. Ooh, wow. So many layers. Do we want to say more about her family or the landscape of...
I'll say one other thing about kind of Jackie as a character, not with regards to her family, but her foil throughout the chapter, right? Where this is the chapter that starts to set up Jackie and Kate as the foils to one another.
Yeah.
Right? There's several places where that happens, right? At one point, I forget what character it is, calls Jackie Kate Morris for the rational set.
Yep.
Which is fascinating. That's page 243. And then throughout the rest of the chapter, right, Kate becomes this haunting absence through everything they're talking about. And also a point of obsession for Jackie herself. At one point she says, she listens to the podcast interview that we just read.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing to say. 12 times. It's like her 11th time or something that she's listening to it. Yeah.
But then also Kate becomes like the target.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
For some extreme ratfuckery. But then there's also, I was going to maybe save this for later, but I think we should look at the final paragraph now. Because it makes me laugh so hard. So this is after, so it's also just like a gut punch of a final 2 lines. Jackie says, sometimes I have this, I guess you'd call it a nostalgia for the worst moments of my life, which we might come back to. That sounds terrible, Fred whispered. No, it's not. I like remembering them because those moments, that's what's vivid, unforgettable, which is actually a hard but true thing, maybe. And then, Jackie says, he pulled me closer and I let him. Outside, the thunder shook the whole building, and the lightning spiked again, and this time the entire sky raged with electric blue fire.
Yeah.
There's literally fierce blue fire in Jackie's closing of her chapter.
That's really funny. I underlined that twice. I wrote LOL, but also put a question mark. Like, it feels ominous.
Yes.
It is the last line of book 2, not just the chapter.
It sure is.
Yeah. Wow. I also really liked, and this was going to get an honorable mention in our, what are cultural artifacts again? Our projection section, John. Yeah. Our projection slide of our deck.
Long time on one slide here,
but they also, one joke reference to Kate is she who must not be named, which is very interesting. And maybe we can come back to the Harry Potter references sprinkled throughout. I don't know if we're going to dig into J.K. Rowling or what. This I only worked on the first 3 slides of this pitch deck. So. Should we talk about the Sustainable Future Coalition?
Absolutely.
Have we met the Sustainable Future Coalition before?
So. No.
I was weirdly sort of like...
We have in real life. Right?
Yeah.
We haven't in the book.
Yes. I was pulled back when the Sustainable Future Coalition is introduced in this chapter to the secret Pentagon meeting. And I couldn't figure out why. Like, that's just sort of where in the place we've already been in the book that my brain immediately went to. And I don't know if it was just like the kind of parody in the way the conversation at the pitch goes versus what was going on in that meeting, or if there was like some ground being laid for this, like, let's make a coalition that's like fake or something. But I was just like, wow, these analogies or like lines of flight are strong.
I think it's the perfect analogy to draw, and I have to assume, even though it's been a couple of chapters ago, right, or maybe just a couple of interludes ago, that we were in that meeting negotiating the details of the bill and everything with Ash, and then before that with Matt.
Yeah.
That this is paired with that chapter, the Ash chapter in particular, like the most cynical chapter in this extremely cynical novel.
Yeah.
Right? In the Sustainable Future Coalition, the pitch that Jackie has is that the fossil fuel and mining and et cetera, public energy companies are going to be the Green New Deal and co-opt the language of inclusiveness and working together so they can maintain the social license to operate, right? To promote images of abundance and natural world, to promote an image of you have to have a vital and rebellious life to be part of the transformation. And like having the extractors themselves take on the language of the Green New Deal is, I think, one of the bleakest things in this entire novel that's full of bleak shit.
I also felt like it was such a visceral portrayal of, and it's not even greenwashing, it's like a strategy.
Yeah.
Like we are taking Green New Deal away from you, and also at the same time rendering less potent this like other thing, Climate X or whatever, right? But you mentioned her like invocation of abundance, and I thought that was such a fascinating like sort of demonstration of a kind of mastery of like, or savviness maybe, with sort of like liberal ecology, right? Like she says, this is on 259, she says, forget the nudge, or no, somebody else says this, forget the nudge tactics. Oh no, it is her. Forget the nudge tactics. We want images of abundance, symbols of health and well-being. And then she says, like, abundance is not just economic, though. It's the natural world. We want that imagery suffusing the campaign. This is industry declaring itself reformed, that it's all in for the future. Oh, that's not a bad tag. But, like, I think her, you know, this is something that in like environmental political theory, people struggle with in terms of like mining the canon for insights into like how to either think about nature or like convince people that we should think about nature, or like whatever it is we mine the canon for. And like increasingly I'm sort of like, what for? But like with Locke, right, folks are kind of turned to this, what is it? In the state of nature, our reason sort of gives us this natural limit to what we can consume. It's the limit of spoilage, right? If we take more than we can use, then we've sort of violated this like essential natural principle. But we've created money, so we've gotten around that, right? And then some people try to go like, okay, well, is there not something there that we can pull out that tempers, right, the fix that money provides? And is it not like that we're spoiling the whole earth or something, or like depleting all the resources? Is that not like the ultimate spoilage limit in terms of like the you know, the ethical ground of a natural law of consumption or something like that? Yeah. And like, I don't know if she invokes that cynically here, or if she's like genuinely a sort of like capital L liberal in her heart.
We can cryptic foreshadow around the is she a kind of liberal in her heart for later in the novel. But I think that's one of the maybe few places where she is both genuine and cynical at the same time. I actually read the chapter, although I think it is worth discussing, like whether this is just pure kind of cynicism or like nihilism from Jackie with her pitch here. I think there are clues to that question, and what we learned the other campaigns that she's worked on are. Yeah. Right. So the lower level, right, still bad, but lower level is like she gives Adidas this like sine qua non tagline, but then the real innovation is that Adidas is going to like donate shoes to every child in Africa.
Yeah, every shoeless child in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. And she explicitly says no one gives a shit about like what the factory conditions in Bangladesh are, right? As long as they can feel good about themselves for doing that. And if in the process, right, you have however many millions of kids growing up with Adidas as a logo that they see, right, that's a nice thing too. But then like, I think the really, really horrid, like monstrous shit is her campaign that she does for the Pentagon. Yeah. After there's like a whistleblower that talks about how poorly they handle allegations of sexual assault in the military, in which Jackie like leans into that like accusation and being like, that's the real soldier, right? The whistleblower is the real soldier, and that's why you women should join the American military.
Yeah. What's the tagline? It's like, progress has never been easy. That's why the story of history is the story of women who fought for their rights, for their families, for their humanity, for their country.
Oh my God.
Like, what? That's insane. That's on the top of 254.
Yeah, on the bottom of 253, you put images of suffragettes, Rosa Parks, Joe Hogan, and you put the image of Brandy Squires testifying before Congress.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of thing that, like, ratfuckery was invented to describe.
Well, also, I mean, thinking back to our discussion of her as a character and her ambivalence about sexual encounters in general with men, like, yikes. Mm-hmm. This, like, we're going to lean and steer into the skid of sexual violence.
She did.
Yeah.
She did, yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently it worked. Right?
Yeah.
Steering to the skid does. And they recruited at higher rates of recruitment of women to the military.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about who the members of the Sustainable Futures Coalition are.
Yeah, we'll go out of order. We'll introduce the team earlier in the pitch deck.
Well, no, I don't mean the people. I mean, like, who's part of the coalition.
Right.
Because it's like, here. This is on 244. An unprecedented black box of money that counted among its members the National Association of Manufacturers, the Aluminum Association, GM, Ford, 4 agribusiness firms, several railroad companies, a dozen electric utilities, 15... Sorry, I'm hearing this in the 12 Days of Christmas.
That makes sense.
15 major real estate developers, 3 private security and logistics firms, including the behemoths of the field, Century and Suritas, and every major player in the oil, coal, and gas sectors, from primary energy developers to the associated industries that serviced exploration and transportation of fuels. Yeah. And, like, the president of the SFC is the former Exxon chief, Tom Duncan Michaels. Mm-hmm. Is that that's not a real person?
I don't think so. I didn't check, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Considering what's gets said about him in the chapter, I think that's a definite no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's fair. That paragraph. I mean, that's like a sentence. That's one sentence.
It is.
That's incredible. Mm-hmm. I just want to know, like, was Markley, like, grinning while he wrote that? And just, like, a big...
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like, on the one hand, it's a fuck you to all those industries, but it's also sort of like a fuck you to, like, the centrist, what do they call it? Unmovable voter or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the hardest sentences to, like, take in is at one point in the pitch, Jackie talks about how, like, okay, they already killed the Green New Deal once, so now they're rehabilitating it to oppose themselves against Climate X, and that their Green New Deal, the Sustainable Future Coalition's Green New Deal, includes a bunch of geoengineering stuff to allow you to exploit your reserves well into the 22nd century.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And then they're going to attack Kate from the left.
Yeah. Yeah, and her discussion of that is really intense.
Do you think Jackie has a moral compass? Is that a relevant category or question?
I don't know. I mean, she seems to understand the ethical charge of the things that she's saying, but to sort of be, like, passively, like, observing the ethical stakes rather than, like, being personally or actively invested in an ethical outcome.
And then assimilating them into her advertising strategies.
Yeah. It's, I mean, she's a fascinating character. I want to come back to that question later, though. Like, the question of her, I mean, not even today, but, like, in later chapters. I'm like, how do we place her? I might have something to sort of say about that tangentially in my market and competitive landscape slide.
I can't wait.
AKA theory listeners.
Should we talk about the 2 of the important men in her life? ?
Yes. Okay, so I have a lot to say about the pastor.
Okay.
So the actor comes back.
Yes.
He has officially changed his name legally. So we never know his actor name.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is now the pastor, capital
that's his government name.
Capital P,
Yeah.
the pastor. And he's apparently blown up, incredibly famous and stirring up some things. So Jackie overhears some women talking about him, I think, on a flight.
Mm-hmm.
And she sort of reflects like, oh, I wonder if I ever told anyone that story.
And she didn't.
And yeah, and then we don't get a kind of real discussion of his trajectory from the actor to the pastor until later. And she talks about his like evangelizing about like plagues. So this starts on page 260. She says, you know, I followed him over the years from afar, blah, blah, blah. And then she does a really interesting thing before she starts to like trace for the reader some of his career trajectories and some of his new views. And she says like, and she's talking about her own love life and like where she places him in that kind of story of herself. And, you know, she says like, she's mad at the men. Don't let yourself be sold and sold to like that. And then she quotes J. Walter Thompson. Do you know who that is?
An old school advertising exec.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Why are you? Up. Yeah, I did too. But I was like, why are you quoting this like man who died in 1920? But he says, this is an age of faith. All ages have been ages of faith. Disbelief requires an effort of the will, while belief requires only acquiescence. And then she pivots from that to like, I couldn't wonder if the actor ever thought of me, you know, like this doesn't mean I can wonder. And then it's like quotes from the pastor's, a sermon of his, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Like, I had a vision of a plague, and when both my parents passed during COVID, a crisis I foresaw, that's when I knew I had to quit acting. I had to escape the secular media, go back home, begin rededicating myself to Jesus Christ. And then later, we're living through yet another scourge, a plague, this one born not on the back of a virus, but a plague of consumption, addiction, and poverty of the soul. And man, oh man, the times they just grow darker and darker, don't they? And it means something, my friends, it does. And I was like, really, I'm really struck by this. So Jackie wants to of him, right? Yeah. Jackie wants him to somehow become the face of the Sustainable Future Coalition's Green New Deal.
Yep.
But he is like tapping into this whole other, you know, doomsday thing. Mm-hmm. But I thought this reference to COVID as like the plague that was sort of the premonition of like the evangelist premonition is actually kind of interesting, because that was one evangelical response to COVID. The other was science denialism. Sure. Like straight up, like it isn't real. It's a political hoax.
Right.
Not even like trying to square it with some sort of doctrine of what did we talk about when we talked about Connolly a few chapters back? The like retributive God, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like interesting. I wonder if that needle's ever going to get threaded. Like if the retribution gets channeled back to this, like, you know, doubt machine, or like how she wants to use him. I'm like, she does not say. She just is watching these sermons, and then she says, text Linda Holiday, what about this guy who just changed his name to the pastor? Might be a good candidate. His slapdish ratings are big. So we're like, what? How? Like, I was sort of, I don't even remember how she uses him.
They don't.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's not enough of a spoiler that I don't feel bad saying.
Yeah. But like, I can't picture here what she's imagining using him for is, I guess, the real point.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth noting what comes immediately after, right? She then is narrating more of the sermon, right? And here he says, call to mind Matthew 24, 26 through 8, right? And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and droughts and great storms. All these are beginning of sorrows, right? So that's the pastor all reading from Matthew.
Yeah.
But like that's where the next step in the sermon is. Like immediately, I think, negates the like abundance imagery that Jackie wants to use, which I think like maybe is demonstrating that, you know, she's clearly has some sort of like emotional or affective tie to the actor / the pastor still. I mean, as evidenced by the fact that she at several points compares Fred, right,
To
who
the
she starts
pastor,
having sex
yeah.
with, to the pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. What do we want to say about Fred? He's okay.
He's a crisis PR guru.
Yeah. He owns, right, the firm.
Yeah.
Crisis management. He's also introduced to us as Dark Arts several times before we meet him
This
by
is
name.
another of the Harry Potter references.
A little wink wink to future deck slides. Is that what they're called?
Sure. And also, I just want to put a cryptic foreshadowing on the fact that Fred is getting involved in some new finance venture.
Yes. And he appears to be like courting her very hard and intentionally. They have this like moment where they're post-coital and he's starts to sort of like confide in her about his marriage, his son, and she bristles at it, but sort of acquiesces and then can sense that he wants some intimacy in exchange, and that's when she talks about the nostalgia for the worst moments of my life, which I think is like such a funny like fake intimate thing to say, because it requires neither divulging any of those worst moments of your life or like reflecting on them in any meaningful way. It's just like a aphorism of like I am deep.
It's a tagline for a pitch. Is what it is. Right?
Oh my god. So bleak.
Should we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, let's do it. What's our next slide?
Key product features. What's your one sentence summary for this chapter?
I just went sort of sparse with this one,
Please.
But mine is Jackie sees a fork and takes the dark path.
That's better than mine. Jackie spearheads a counterintuitive rat fuck of an advertising strategy for the worst corporations in the world as she navigates her sex life and fights off an anti-nostalgic nostalgia.
That's good. That's more descriptive. I would argue that they're the same sentence.
They exactly are the same sentence. There's no doubt about that.
Are there any plot notes that we're missing?
I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
I don't think anything that we haven't covered. So should we head to the marketing competitive landscape?
Yeah, I'm wondering now whether it makes sense that our key product features slide is the shortest one. But again, this comes from extensive knowledge of the pitch deck.
We're steering into the skid. Is what we're doing.
Yes. Okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first. Mine will be quick at the end because I still don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, so though this is not a chapter where we are in the back room of the Pentagon, I went with Corey Robin's The Reactionary Mind.
Nice.
Which, for a couple reasons. One, I think this chapter sort of chillingly highlights the degree to which politics, even in the like traditional narrow sense, happens outside of the offices of elected officials and happens inside the offices of people who have no formal affiliation to the state.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking about ideologically what they are tapping into here.
Yes.
And thinking about, I'm going to say Corey because we know him.
Yeah,
Corey's argument that people kind of mistake conservatism as a sort of like ideology that's always about preservation and tradition. And he wants to say, actually, we can gather a bunch of kind of different modes of conservatism under the same umbrella. And the through line or the thread is a reaction to a kind of political impulse to empower or embolden the disenfranchised. And he talks about this as a historical phenomena, but also as an ideological phenomena. And it is sometimes compatible with a kind of commitment to tradition or a moral worldview that's about a specific kind of concrete world order. But that historically, those sort of come to an apex or come to be sort of revolutionary in and of themselves at moments where like the future of the state is sort of up for grabs, right? So like famously, conservatism sort of begins as a reaction to the left wing of the French Revolution, right? That like what the French Revolution is going to do is going to like destroy the fabric of European society. And so we have to temper, right, the revolutionary fervor. And one way to do that is to pull on right? Like a tradition or to theorize actually like the ways in which mass movement threatens a kind of stable order.
Yes.
And so like it takes a bunch of different shapes. But I was thinking that like the debates that they have about how to handle Kate, right? So Kate is a political problem, but she's also a problem for all these corporations continuing to exist and to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And the strategy near the end of the chapter that Jackie outlines in like moments of intimacy with Fred,
Yes.
not even in the room,
Notable.
is like, let's sick the left on her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very like astute.
Mm-hmm. So it's susceptible to fights over purity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like susceptible to like being let loose and burning out and like cannibalizing itself.
Yes.
Right. So like the thing I was going to say if I did the intro was like John and Emily, lefties themselves who love to eat our own. But like, you know, she says that and it's not wrong. And I think for conservatives, especially, you know, like Burke, right? One of the threats of the left is not just that it will cannibalize itself, because then who cares? That's not a real threat, but that it will like cannibalize everything.
Yes.
And that like that is scary because it means on the one hand that like we don't know what's coming next. On the other hand, it means that like people who have benefited in some way from the status quo, even if they're not in the highest positions of power, have to accept less for the promise of we don't know what. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that like, even though they were talking about this as a marketing strategy issue, it like very perfectly encapsulates like what's at stake in responding to something like a like left challenge that is undefinable. Right. So like this is the thing, the observation she makes about Kate too in her Climate X, is she's like, people don't understand what it is because she's not very good at explaining it. Mm-hmm. Because what is it? You know, which like, I don't know. This is, I mean, we're back and we've talked so much already on this podcast about like debates among the left, but like, I think that she nails that, and she nails it as a way of like sort of not justifying, but explaining, right? Mm-hmm. Like the existence of a conservative reaction to that spirit.
Right. And there's something about the precision of that I think also speaks to Corey's book, right? And that the diagnosis of the problem is actually like a good diagnosis of the problem, both with Kate and also kind of with the shift in public ideas and moods and discourses and frames and all of that too, right? That like the insistence that they have to move beyond denialism and doubt and motive questioning, that like saying it's not real isn't going to work anymore.
Yeah.
And there's something about the clear-eyedness of that for Jackie that I think speaks to your point. Yeah. It's a great poem.
But so maybe like, is Jackie a liberal? Maybe if she's like a classic liberal, she's also a conservative, but like a like Burkean conservative, not like an American like evangelical conservative or
Unless
whatever.
Those are the same.
Unless those are the same.
Corey,
yeah. Well, not the same.
Not the same.
Yeah.
But tapping into the same conservative position.
And I do also think Corey's book is relevant. Disposition. I do think Corey's book is relevant to this book more broadly. Like one of the things he fights with people about all the time is like how to read Trump. Like people, he like very much wants to reject the idea that Trump is the sort of epitome of like fascism, like fascism qua America or whatever. Yeah. And he's like, actually, he makes sense because like when the right is effective and like sort of revolutionary in its own right is usually against a robust leftist challenge. When the right has been in power and like doesn't have a robust left challenge, it sort of like cannibalizes itself, maybe somewhat like ironically, right? And that like that celebrity would sort of like emerge as a response to these kind of like interwar conservative struggles or battles over where to go next, right? Makes sense. And I think the specter of like celebrity is, and like what that does to the democratic process or whatever, is sort of like haunting this novel as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Including haunting Kate, right? Like what does it mean to be a genuine activist and also a major celebrity.
Yeah. So that's my theory poll.
That's great. That's much better than mine. I'm going to be extremely boring and go with Baudrillard, simulacra, and simulation.
I mean, okay.
It's
that's
obvious.
Not boring.
It's obvious.
Now I want to go home and watch The Matrix.
That would make sense as our is our projections.
Yeah.
But no, I think that one of the characteristics of Jackie is her faith in the ability of the ad industry, her cynical faith in the ability of the ad industry, right, to construct effective enough, right, simulacras of something approximating reality that are, I think she recognizes like partial rather than totalizing, but nonetheless like can be effective at shaping the way that people understand and experience reality itself. And thus I think that there's like something about the reappropriation of the Green New Deal, something about the way in which she is able to both like unsentimentally, right, just like think through like here are all of the quadrants in order to make this simulacra effective, right, and the comprehensiveness of it that just speaks like to that faith she has in the ability of the simulacras, like to do actual work on humans and individuals. Right. So thus, like, I think that Baudrillard becomes someone interesting to think about this chapter with. Although, like, I think we can also bring a same question to Jackie that we could often bring to Baudrillard himself. And that's, I have wondered throughout this chapter in particular, whether Jackie has too much faith in the power of advertising, right? Or too much faith in her ability or her industry's ability to construct something like reality or to construct effective simulacra. So there's like both the Baudrillard itself, but also the like critique of how totalizing, right, the simulacra and simulation could actually be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great poll.
Yeah.
And I suspect too the question of like, I don't know, reality is going to become important for us. Cryptic foreshadowing?
There's definitely some cryptic foreshadowing in my use of Baudrillard. I'll give that as well.
Amazing.
And in your Matrix reference, we might add.
Should we move to our operating model?
I still definitely know what that is, but I think for us, that's the comedy.
It's millennial comedy, yeah. My margins for this chapter are riddled with LOLs, but a lot of them are like kind of dark, like literally Sustainable Future Coalition and the list of players, LOL.
Yeah,
like
Sustainable Future Coalition.
I really liked that when she's sort of like bitterly describing at the beginning of the chapter her sadness at her father's passing, but her sadness at work. And she's talking about Procter & Gamble as like a generations old institution that's caught up in an inexplicable fad that sneered at home bathroom products. You know, those cosmetics we've been smearing on ourselves for more than a century. Turns out they're vile markers of hyperconsumption, poisoning our water, and one can get by just fine with a simple bar of soap. Profits go down for a few consecutive quarters, and the easiest, oddly ritualistic sacrifice is the ad agency. I was just like, what a fucking opening paragraph. It's so funny.
It's really, really
funny. Her rage is like so self-righteous and so like pointed at not even consumers, because the consumers I think are the victim here. Yes. Well, she's the victim. Yes. The ad agency is the oddly ritualistic victim. Yeah, the sacrifice. Yeah.
I guess we should have some Agamben for the competitive landscape.
Damn it.
There's a pairing with that at the end of the chapter when she tells her mom just don't buy the organic stuff because it's a marketing ploy. Yeah. Which is really funny in multiple levels. Because like, again, it's the we're way beyond greenwashing such that Jackie just can joke about greenwashing. Yeah. Yeah. I liked that there's this line about an asteroid made of money in a chapter that's like about the fossil fuel and mining industries. Yeah. Who would love to go mine some asteroids for some rare metals.
That's so good. I also really liked when she noted the former Trump Tower. I got a little LOL wink at that because the Trump Tower appeared in her first chapter. Yeah.
That the gag that they always do is they show a hipster on a hoverboard who runs into a glass door with a coffee spilling all over him.
So funny.
Could be me.
And then everybody laughs. Yeah. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I know this is a bit played out, but people love it. It's like, oh my God.
I like self-righteousness again.
Yeah. I liked when they're critiquing her pitch and they want to go back to the old doubt manufacturing, and one of them calls says to evoke the watermelon bullshit.
I laughed that so hard. Yeah.
Green on the outside, red on the inside. So good.
There's a joke about the former Exxon CEO. I think it's a Jeffrey Epstein joke.
Going to Thailand. To spend money on child prostitutes. Yeah.
Yep.
I was like, LOL. I literally wrote LOL, yikes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of good.
Yeah, there's a Post Malone joke about Gruber.
Yeah,
I thought was funny.
Yeah, it's a good one. A lot of good. What do you call them? Like cynical jokes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Befitting the chapter.
Should we do our funding requests?
Yes, please,
okay.
Emily. What
My
do you got?
Funding request is strategic accommodation of the persuadable middle.
Ooh. I think we might combine ours. Mine has some creative punctuation, so I'm going to have to be specific. Steer, comma, capital S, capital I into the period, 5 spaces, skid, capital S, period.
Whoa. Okay. And then strategic accommodation of the persuadable middle.
Yep,
Yes, I think they work perfectly together. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Shall we pitch our projections?
We should. There's a couple obvious ones here. Right. Thank You for Smoking would I think be like maybe the most obvious one.
Yeah.
Mad Men is another obvious one that gets referenced in the chapter.
Yeah. Sun Tzu.
Yeah, exactly. Gil Scott-Heron writes The Revolution will not be televised, and we get the title of this chapter, which is worth noting, How to Stop a Revolution.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with...
that was another thing I was going to say for why Corey's book is relevant. Yeah,
yes,
I forgot to mention the title. Yeah,
perfect. And I will say the Post Malone reference got me thinking that I think Jackie would be like a Jelly Roll listener.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
but I'm going to go with none of those. I'm going to go with, as a cultural artifact specifically, in honor of your Naomi Klein's cultural artifact from earlier in our work, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins.
Nice.
So the book I think is 07, and then 08 is the paperback, and then there's a film about him in 09. Are you familiar with Confessions of an Economic Hitman? Okay, so this was in like lefty international studies college students of the late aughts. Like this was the thing, and this is why I think it's a cultural artifact. So Perkins is like this weird ass guy who worked for like a consulting firm that like consulted with foreign governments.
Oh.
And he writes this like lightly fictionalized quasi-autobiography of extremely questionable credibility about like how he manipulated world leaders into like accepting Washington consensus policies.
Whoa.
And there's something about like the Perkins of it all, and just the fact that like that was very much a moment in my youth.
The sort of like self-aggrandizement.
I think Perkins like came to give a talk like when the book came out at where I went to undergrad. And this is also me being like caught in my own nostalgia like Jackie, right? Because like the book and the film were huge among us in the late aughts.
That's amazing.
But more specifically, there's something about the like consulting crisis PR of Fred advertising firm of Jackie et al. Right? And we have to manipulate, in this case, like not governments, but we have to on the one side manipulate fossil fuel industries to accept the We Are the Green New Deal, with the ultimate goal of persuading all the persuadable middle, right, to accept that the fossil fuel industry should be the leaders going forward for sustainability. And there's just something about like about the manipulation, the coercion, the like the simulacra, and all of those sorts of things that spoke to me about Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
That's amazing.
Chapter.
I love that. I'm gonna propose to like. What's up with the very scant Harry Potter references?
Okay.
Is there something deeper to those references in this chapter? And if so, what are those analogs?
Markley is interested in cancel culture.
Yeah. So is it like a wink at J.K. Rowling, or is it like we are like the stakes of climate crisis are like Voldemort is gonna destroy all of the wizarding world? Like what, like what's that? I don't know. I don't have an answer for it, but I thought it was really interesting that it's like the dark arts, right? Like capital D, capital A. it could be something else, but
that's
that's
Fred, right?
Yeah.
But then Kate is Voldemort.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So like, what does it mean? I don't know. Maybe we need to go back and watch all the Harry Potter movies and then reread this book.
That's a special bonus Crandall only episode, I think.
Yeah. The other thing I want to pitch, which is also, I think, in the same vein of what you're doing, but I think everybody, if you've not read it, should read Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway's book Merchants of Doubt. And it's like explicitly referenced here.
Yeah.
It's the story of how the same exact scientists produced research for the tobacco companies as produced research, sort of like casting doubt on the consensus of climate change. And the book is like incredible. The archive of stuff that they draw on is like amazing. And it's just, I mean, this one fact that like, it's literally the same people. It's like the same 5 guys working for all these companies. And just like the way that they do it, I spent a lot of time thinking about this in my dissertation because the way that they write the scientific studies is not like anti-scientific. It is pulling on one part of the scientific method, which is falsifiability, and kind of centering that as like the primary evidentiary basis for rejecting a hypothesis rather than confirming a different hypothesis. And it's like actually quite clever. If you're not super scientifically literate, it seems like real. It seems like it's really good because it's like calling attention to something that doesn't fit. But like, that's not what science does not, aspire to. Science, capital S, does not aspire to explain everything in one. I don't know. It's like, we've talked about
absolutely
normal science or whatever a lot, but they just do a really excellent job of tracing it. Also, the copy of that book I have has a black cover. There's a new cover of it that looks like this. I'm showing John because we are recording together in person for the first time. But it looks a lot like the cover of the Deluge.
It sure does.
It's like almost the same font. It says Merchants of Doubt at the top and their names at the bottom. And the difference is that the Deluge cover is clouds with like a
sun tearing the universe, fabric of the universe, just like crown of the world.
Stunning. Yeah. But in Merchants of Doubt, it's a smokestack, but the pattern of the smoke looks like a cloud. Yep. It's like I was just like, this can't be a coincidence.
I really want to know if it is, because you're right about the font as well. That I think actually kind of clinches it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know when this version was published, but the original book came out in 2010. Yeah. So, I mean, and obviously Mark Lee read it. Or knew of it or listened to it. Yeah. There's just like even the words that he uses in the way that they're talking about the necessity to continue to manufacture that doubt. It was a self-conscious. Yep. What they uncover is that it was like a self-conscious strategy. So it's just like, this is that, right? Like this is the self-conscious strategy emerging and realizing itself.
Yeah. And I like this is a cultural artifact.
Yeah.
Right. And this cultural artifact that finds its way, I think you're right, into the book itself.
Yeah.
Should quickly go over the team and then you and I have to get going actually, right?
We sure do. We got places to be.
We do. So we got the whole, team of ad execs, Ben Gruber, the Post Malone punk.
Such a good.
Turned into an ad. Classic, like, I think good stock character, right? The punk who turned into an ad exec.
Yeah.
Linda Holliday, Beth McClan, Patrick Eates, and Darnell Green. Then we got Fred, who we talked about. The Sustainable Future Coalition. I think we should especially note that Emily Song will come back. So pay attention to her. And then at various points throughout the novel, Jackie's family will come back. So
we have her mom, her dad has passed, and her sister Allie and her brother Eric.
Yep.
And then the pastor.
The
pastor.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Up next, we're moving into book 3.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you believe it? Thanks for coming along with us.
Seriously.
And the first chapter we'll read in book 3 is Keeper, the Derrico, and the Light.
Beautiful.
Set in 2030. So we're only going 1 year forward in time.
Yes.
Yeah.
No more huge time jumps, if I remember, throughout the whole novel.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Book 1 to book 2 is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for joining us on We Are the Deluge.
And we are the Deluge.